So let me check. I think you can open the YouTube live stream so that we can check on the comments.
Okay.
I guess we should be live. Let me just check what people in the comments. I guess we should be live. Let me just check what people in the comments. Great. I guess we should be live. Let me just check what people in the comments. Great. Yeah, this is good. So I think let's get started, Sagar, and we've been collecting questions from our from the fellows over at Nova Semita, for you. But before we get into those questions, we'd probably like to get started off with a few questions that we ourselves, had, so as to set the agenda and to get everyone up to speed. So as we put out on the poster, Sagar is currently working at Ford. He's an alumnus of Goa Engineering College as well as Arizona State University. At Goa Engineering College, Sagar went degree in mechanical engineering, and did take up a position as an assistant professor, if I am
I was
not
working
mistaken.
for a year there. Yeah.
Followed by a stint at Arizona State University, completed his master's in aerospace engineering, and eventually landed up here, a job at Ford as a vehicle harmony design engineer, right, Sagar? So let's started off. Could you tell us more about what you do at Ford, what your role involves at Ford?
Yeah. So, and I think that I want to go into depths of that because I think that ties in well with the overarching theme of today's talk, as in what is happening to core jobs, right? Are we online?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. All right. What I do at my job at Ford, as you said, my job it's called vehicle harmony engineer, but that doesn't tell you a lot. So there are basically four large parts of my job that we do. One is switch feel. So if you just look around you on all the buttons that you interact, the buttons on your phone, the buttons on your keyboard, the buttons on the wall on your switch, they all have a very distinct feel and they all feel very different, right? The keyboard switch feels very different from your electrical switch on the wall. So all different types of switches have very different feels. And because they are very different functions, the switch on the wall has to remain in the position that you set it at, but your keyboard switch has to come back. And again, this is a thing with knobs. The knob on your gas stove feels different from the knob on your volume control on your radios, right? So all switches feel very different, and that is not by accident. Someone has to design what a switch feels like. So first part of my job is deciding what switches in our cars should feel like. And I did not know this was a job before I took this up. But in that half a second that it takes you to press a switch, there is a certain amount of travel that the switch has. There's a certain amount of force that the switch requires. There's a certain amount of friction that you experience. When you turn a knob, there's a certain amount of torque that you need to apply. And all of those in a car are designed. There are very specific values that all those values are designed to, because we have done the research to figure out what kind of switch press a customer, I should not say like, but does not hate, because it's important that you not notice an action like that. So if you have never noticed you pressing a switch, we have done our job right. So first part of my job is designing switch feel for all the driver controls in a car. The second, what we do is illumination. So if you sit in your car at night, all the buttons are backlit. You see there is a text that illuminates. All your screens are backlit. There's certain amount of brightness. Now, in a car, it is important that those things are bright enough for you to read, but not so bright that they distract you and stop you from seeing on the road. Again, that does not happen by accident. Someone has to make sure that those values are dialed in properly. And even when a switch is backlit, when the switch on it says AC, it's not easy to make that entire word lit very uniformly, right? So that is a part of our job, to make sure these illuminations are done right. Again, something you will have never put any thought behind. But if you sit in a 1995 Maruti and you sit in a current Maruti, you'll realize the difference I mean. And there is like a lot of research that goes into making this happen. The third part about my job is chimes, or as we call it, it's just basically acoustics. So when you don't wear your seatbelt, or when you turn on your turn signals, all the sounds that you hear, the click, clock, the warnings that you hear when you're reversing your car, there is a beep, beep, beep that you hear. Again, all of those are not by accident. Certain sounds convey a level of urgency to you. Certain sounds are just more informational. Hey, you're turning, your TikTok is on. That is an information. Whereas if you're reversing your car and it's about to hit a wall, that's a red flag. You need to be warned by that. So how these sounds actually come across to the user and what it conveys, that's a part of what we design. And fourth, what we call it welcome farewell. Now this, it's hard to appreciate sitting in India, but a lot of the cars here, when you walk up to the car and say you're 3 meters from the car, your door handles pop up, your lights under the mirrors come on, your headlights come on. Then when you, and even for the cars in India, when you unlock the door and you open the door, your dome light comes on, your instrument cluster comes on, your lighting in the switches comes on if you turn on the car at night. And then when you actually start your car, your instrument cluster does a welcome animation, the needles go across. Now, all that experience, again, does not happen by default. Someone has to design this experience in a way that makes sense for the user. As in, when does a customer needs light inside the car, when the lights outside the car? Someone has to design that whole experience. And the higher up you go in the car food chain, luxury cars have elaborate experiences when you enter the car. Again, somebody has to design these experiences, and that's a part of what we do. Now, if you look at all these four aspects of my job, they're tremendously interdisciplinary. The first part was switch field. I'm looking at the mechanical aspects. How much does a spring deform? How much does a plastic deform? That's a very mechanical part of it. But I also have to worry about the electronic part of it. When does it do electrical contact? Is it right for the type of circuit that I have in the car? So there's electronics involved. The second part, as I said, was illumination. Now, illumination is not as simple as putting a LED on a PCB behind the switch. We need to make sure the optics are right for the light to look uniform. We need to make sure the PWM that the circuits are supplying to it are working at the light level such that the light is not flickering. So there's part of optics, there's part of electronics, there's part of coding that's involved there. Then we come to the chimes. That is not just a computing coding problem, but it's also about acoustics. It's also about psychology on what a user thinks is an alert versus what he thinks is an information. And you'll notice that when you plug in your phone, it does a ting ding, and then you plug it up, dung dung. It's a very subtle difference, but it tells you you have charged versus discharged. So that's a psychology coming in. And finally, welcome farewell. That is, again, it looks very simple. It's something you know don't notice when you're getting inside your car, everything that's happening when you're getting inside your car. But there is a lot of coding involved in making that happen. There's a lot of electronics. We have to worry about power draw. We have to worry about radio antennas, whether it can detect your car key fob or not, whether it can detect the fact that you asked the car to unlock or not. So we have to be worried about coding as well as radio frequencies as well as electronics. So each part of this job is tremendously interdisciplinary. And I think that is what our talk is about. That in today's world, there's no such thing as a core job where you're just responsible for one small domain on what you studied. You need to be aware of domains that affect your product. And more of our products are becoming smart products where these things are increasingly common. So yeah, that's the long answer to what I do.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sagar. As I think the common adage goes, design is, I mean, the best design is often invisible. I mean, that's what
Yeah,
design should, strive to be when it comes to
very much.
delivering
Yeah.
experiences. Like what I would want to do for a while now is to rewind and take you back a decade or so, and talk
Mhm,
about your schooling for a
mhm,
short period of time. So
mhm,
when it comes to your experience, in school, what do you think when has gone a long way in making you who you are, like things, incidences maybe that have stood out in this, making you the professional or the individual that you are today? And what do you wish was different about your journey in
mhm.
obviously a positive way?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So in terms of what has worked well for me from my schooling days is I took a lot of interest then in the extracurricular activities. So things like elocution competitions, just public speaking events. And I think if I have to choose one thing from my school career that has helped me a lot, it is that, because being able to confidently make your point to a crowd is a skill that will serve you irrespective of what stream you enter in. And by the way, this is not a skill people are born with, yet some amount of it may be born, but this is a skill you can work on, you can develop, and you can inculcate in yourselves. And I cannot stress it to enough, whatever job you do, irrespective of the industry you go to, communication skills makes or breaks your career. It is being able to make your point is a tremendously important skill. And I was lucky to be able to take part in a lot of these competitions in school, and I think they have served me very, very well. So that is far and away the number one important skill. The other skill that I wish I had or our schools had inculcated more in us, I think, is decision making. In the sense that we are always used to being told what to do. Hey, study this, do this. These are the projects. Are you guys online?
Yeah, we're live. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other skill I really wish they had inculcated was decision making. We are increasingly being used to told what to do, like study this, do that. And I wish we had been trained more to make decisions on our own. And that, I think, is a tremendously important skill. And by the way, again, this is a skill you can work on and you can hone. And this is as simple as if a friend's asking you, hey, where do you want to go eat? Most common response we do is, I don't know, whatever works. Don't do that. Like, train yourself to make decisions at the smallest of opportunities, because that trains your mind. As your decisions, you see the outcome of your decisions, you start to you work on that skill. Your mind subconsciously works on decision making skill. So that is again something we can train on, and I wish our schools did a more of a job of putting students in a situation where they had to make decisions. Yeah, those are the two things that I think are really important. And I forgot there was a second part to your question. Am I forgetting it?
Yeah, I think you've covered it a bit. When it comes to decision making, the question was, what do you wish was different about your schooling experience
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so definitely, I wish the decision making thing was slightly different. The other thing I think that our schools can do better is put students in touch with industry professionals, because I think we really miss perspective. We have certain ideas of how certain careers work, but the reality is sometimes very different. And I wish we had more interactions with the industry to discuss what things actually are out in the industry. And I think we get very little exposure of that in schools. We get some amount of exposure to it in colleges, but not nearly enough. But I think the earlier we bring that process to actually explain to people how jobs work, I think that helps. And again, when I say jobs, it's not just like engineer and doctor jobs, but I wish I had graphic designers come to my college. I wish I had fashion designers come to my school. I wish I had people from media and advertising and finance come to my school and explain what it is that they do, because it's really important to open that mind for kids on what is possible out there. And I don't think that happens nearly enough. I wish that was done better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for that, Sagar. So the next question, like moving chronologically, would be about your undergrad college life. If I'm not mistaken, the time when you went to college, it was, let me call it, a pretty MOOC-less world, right? Like
Hmm.
Coursera and so on were pretty much being conceptualized by the time that you graduated from college. Was not as not did not have as strong a presence as it does in today's world. So how was your college life for you? I mean, what are things that stand out for you in your undergrad education at Go Engineering College?
Again, so I think, and Sharmad will appreciate this, right? Like, again, the things that served me well from college were the extracurricular activities. Definitely the events and stuff that you do helps. The other thing I think that worked well for me is um, the through extracurricular activities, right? I think the other good part about extracurricular, apart from the experience that it gives you, is it puts you in touch with like-minded people, and I think that is very, very important, irrespective of which college you are in. Does not matter if it's GEC or IIT or BITS. You need to find the right kind of crowd that it motivates you to be slightly better. At the same time, uh, as a collective, because you guys are holding each other accountable, you tend to reach out to do things that you normally would not do, and that worked out well for me. And by the way, this is very important. The mentality that I saw in GEC was usually to stick to people from your own branch. There were a lot of people in mechanical who wanted to stay with mechanical crowd, same with ETC, same with computers. And I was lucky that we were part of the GEC photography club and we had a robotics club. So I had very good friends across departments, and all those people are people I'm still in touch with. People have gone on to do great things. There are people who are doing PhDs in underwater robotics. There are people who have gone to start companies, fantastic people. And reaching across my department to other departments, I think that really helped me in terms of being in touch with the right people. And again, professors from other departments too. Normally, we are only exposed to professors in our own departments, but through these clubs, I was able to meet like-minded professors from other departments, people who have guided me and mentored me even after college. So I think it's important to seek out that crowd and seek out people who inspire you to do better and not settle for what you have. And coming back to MOOCs, uh, again, I think it was, yeah, MOOCs were just taking off at that time. Some of it also existed. IIT used to do, I forget what it is that they have their MOOC program, right? So they had it at that time, but I think what was missing was definitely internet connectivity, which was a problem at GC and at home at that time. And the other thing was just lack of knowledge. And I think in a sense that problem still stands today, that as many MOOCs as are out there, people's awareness of the MOOCs and then people's discipline to stick with the online courses and actually complete them, that is still a problem. I think Naval Ravikant is one of the smartest guys I follow on Twitter. He had put there, like, the problem is not lack of knowledge, its problem is lack of discipline, and problem is lack of focus to use all that knowledge that's out there. And I think that problem honestly still stands today. So it's not a problem of things existing out there, it's how much you make use of it. And I think it's up to the people on whether how they can leverage that. And by the way, that is another skill that you can't work on enough. It's self-discipline. People can't work on this, and I'm still working on it. It's nothing that I have figured out right now. So
Yeah, it's something that we completely agree over here at Nova Semita, and on a personal footing as well, because I find myself signing up for MOOCs plenty every now and then, because the topics catch my
yeah.
fancy, but it's not often enough that I actually am able to drive a sign up for a course into consistent consumption and completion of the course, which I think, yeah, I mean, even though our access to information has gone up, it's not necessarily done us any good on the personal discipline side. And this is something that we keep on telling our fellows over here at Nova Semita as well, that yeah, I mean, the social aspect of learning is not to be ignored, that building up one's network is not to be ignored. And even though we live in this illusion that we have access to information, can't stress enough, as you said, on the fact that discipline triumphs over anything else. Like, I'm guessing that a person who has more discipline but access to lesser information will, in the long run, probably be able to pack more of a punch as compared to someone with just crazy internet connectivity and
By the way, yeah, and by the way, I think that's where like what you guys are trying to do at Nova Semita, which is basically develop this structured aspect to mentorship and like pointing people in the right direction, I think that is a good way to go. Because again, thinking back to my undergrad days, uh, just because the way GEC worked then, right, we had almost no exposure to CAD software, for example. There was nothing in our course that taught us CAD software. But what happened was there were a few of us like-minded people in the class, and we discovered this website then called GrabCAD. The website is still around. It got acquired a few years back by Stratasys. But what GrabCAD was basically people making different CAD models of like a phone or whatever and uploading it to that website. And I discovered this one day just while casually surfing. And I told my friend about it, Manzil. I'm like, hey, Manzil, there's this website, GrabCAD. People are putting, CAD models and they put it up. And it seems to be, it's nice. It was interesting. And we being the geeks that we were, we dove headfirst into this and we just downloaded SolidWorks. SolidWorks has very good tutorials for you to get started. Like the basics are very, very easy to get started. So we all learned SolidWorks very fast. And then it was us just making models and putting it on their website. In a way, it's like a very geeky version of Facebook where it's the social validation that keeps making you come back to it. But we started uploading CAD models of things that we did, and then we were inspired by what's on that website, which made us learn more skills, put it out there. Then Manzil tried rendering, and it basically skills went on adding. But what was important here is the social aspect of it. It was me and Manzil working together, Achinta. There was a bunch of friends who were into this, and that social aspect kind of made all of us learn those skills when they were not being taught. So I think that social aspect of it is really important, and what you guys are, I think, going for at Nova Semita. So I think that's good. That is what brings some order out of the chaos out there. Yeah. Seem to have lost you guys.
So on to the next phase in your life, that is grad school. A lot of our fellows had questions pertaining to grad school admissions and on. So to get started off with, what was your to your what is experience like? What did those how did they impact you as a person and as a professional? I think that'd
Sorry,
be a
you
good
guys are
start off with.
breaking up. Can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, so our question was pertaining to your time at Arizona State University for grad school. How do you
Mhm.
think those 2 years, when how do you think those 2 years impacted you as a person, as an individual, as a professional, and so
Okay.
on?
Okay, so great question. One thing definitely super sobering experience, right? Because when you're used to, I mean, when everyone around you tells you, okay, you're smart, you're this, and then you get admitted to US, your ego is at an all-time high. Hey, I'm going to the US right now. I'm one of the special ones, whatever. And then you come to the US, and then you realize that people around you are everyone is exactly the same, especially Indians, right? There are a lot of Indians at US universities, and everyone's profile looks identical. Everyone has taken part in a college fest, everyone has done that one final year project, may have worked at Infosys, Cognizant, Wipro for a year or two, and then they've come here, and everyone's profiles look like amazingly the same. And I think one thing the campus placements does for us in India is you don't have to do much to get a job. The companies come to you, they conduct an exam. If you're good enough, they take an interview. The interview is pretty much always behavioral based. There's not much technical that they go into because they train you after and you get a job. It's pretty straightforward.
Is
In
that
the
a
US,
good or a bad thing according to you?
what's that? Say that again.
Question, but do you think that the campus placement system in India, is that a good thing? The way they sort of spoon feed you into getting a job? What?
I don't think it's a matter of good or bad. It is basically what the system in India incentivizes them to do. So look at the problem that the companies in India are trying to sort through, right? They need people with a certain minimum level of skill set because they are going to train you afterwards anyway. The colleges are not training those people. They need an effective way to filter out as many people as they can. It's very much possible that they miss out on a lot of good candidates by setting a percentage criteria. But within the pool that they end up filtering in, there are enough good candidates that they can afford to miss out on a few of those people who have, let's say, they're smart but percentage below 70%. Right? It is something they can afford to do because there are enough good candidates in above 70%. Right? And then the written exams, and that is just a way for them to filter out. And then the interview is, they are just looking out for a certain aptitude, they're looking for a certain level of trainability, and then it works well for them, right? These companies are profitable, they're some of the biggest companies in the world, so it works for them. So there's not a question of good or bad, it is what it is, um, it's very different on in the US side of things, right? It is here there is not an abundance of candidates. There is a limited number of candidates, and at the same time, the companies can they can afford to be more personal while interviewing and all of that, right? So it's just an outcome of the way our populations are stacked up. That is what it is. But coming back to what my MS experience was, right? So the first thing when I came here, number one, it was very humbling. And one of the things that foreign students in the US tend to do is you try to get a campus job because you need to make money for your everyday living, right? To now, when you're in India, you assume, oh, I'll easily get a campus job because I'm good enough and I'm an engineer, I have a degree. What's the skill in getting a campus job? And then you come to the US and then you go. So our university had a website where you applied for campus jobs, and you're applying for jobs like desk clerk, accounting, you're going to be the receptionist at the hostel. And then you start getting rejects for those jobs. And nothing deflates your ego like getting rejected for jobs that you thought you would easily get. But then you realize there are 1,000 people like you applying for the exact same job. So you come back to your senses very fast. And then there's the process of career fairs. So the dominant way of getting a job out of university in the US is a career fair. And what a career fair is basically just an exhibition. You guys are online? Hello?
Yeah, go on. Experiencing signal.
Yeah. So the way the career fairs are, it's basically an exhibition. It's a large exhibition space filled with employers who put up stalls, a lot like exhibitions in India, where you have your career, where you have your consumer shopping and all those exhibitions that happen in Panjim. It's the same. Every employer has a booth, and people go around the room talking to recruiter after recruiter. You can ask questions that you want, and the theory is supposed to be that the recruiters talk to people. If there are some candidates that they like, then they'll call them for interviews after, and then that's supposed to be the process. But what happens in this room is, again, it's filled to the gills with people, lot of them from India. Like, there's a lot of people who come to do their masters from India to US. So it is filled with people, everyone's profiles looking exactly the same. So what the recruiters, more often than not, they ask you to do is they ask you to apply online on their website, which is, again, it's a black hole. You don't know what happens to your application. Some companies send you rejects, some companies don't. You don't know what's happening anymore. So that's what happens, and that is very discouraging because you realize. So when you approach an employer and you're trying to convince him of a reason to hire you, right? You realize that your reasons to hire you sound exactly like every other person in that room. And you quickly realize how little you have done in your life to set yourself apart. Mostly in India, we are just following the herd. Everyone told us to study for IIT. We did that. We get admission to the college we want. We are completing our courses. We are not setting ourselves apart enough. We are not doing enough things that are different from everyone around us, and you realize that quickly very fast because you're standing in the line to talk to a recruiter. Every person ahead of you is saying the exact same things. So that is one thing that's very sobering. The other thing you realize is especially that was especially true for my case because my master's was in aerospace engineering, and every aerospace company, I realized after going there, requires you to be a US citizen to apply for those jobs because the government regulations state that aerospace companies, it's a body of knowledge that is very critical to their defense. So they are very paranoid about exposing non-citizens to that technology. So most 95% of aerospace companies, the first question was, are you a US citizen? And the moment you said no, they were like, sorry, we can't hire you. So again, it was a very like the first few months were an exercise in sobering. So you again come back to normal. That's when the process actually begins of you learning stuff. You trying to learn skills, because now suddenly employers are not coming to you, you are going to employers. So what skills you have, what projects you do matter more. So then you start actually building and being conscious about the skills on your resume and what you have done before, and setting yourself apart. So that was, I think that was a formative experience for me. The other thing that is good about this US universities is, again, extracurricular activities can't focus enough, but ASU had over 1,000 clubs. And the club can be anything from RC aircraft club to Harry Potter fan club. So it's the whole spectrum of clubs. And there's no limit to what you can expose yourself to. And I wish I had that experience in my undergrad. If I had some of the clubs that I had in at ASU, it would have been tremendous. But again, 2 years, that too with a master's degree, you're very short on time. So you have to really choose. But some of the clubs that I was involved in, there was this RC aircraft club that built a RC aircraft for a competition. There was another club that looked into building CubeSats, small satellites. They were trying to build a small satellite for themselves. And then I was involved with the outdoors club, which did a lot of hiking exercises and basically all outdoor stuff. So these were the clubs that I was involved in, and again, fantastic experiences with each of them. It is amazing just how advanced uh, projects the students here get themselves involved into. Because they have many more resources right from their bachelor's days. It's a different level of resources. Like I would not imagine students in bachelor's to work with carbon fiber and advanced manufacturing technology, CNC machines, 3D printing. But these people are just exposed to it at a very early stage. So that was fascinating to see, just the level of professionalism that happens at a very early stage in the university. So that was a great experience for me.
I wanted to ask you was that you said in getting involved in the various clubs and then standing apart from the
Mhm.
crowd. So, what do you think helped you from the experience of those clubs, or what is your advice to the students who are currently in their undergrad doing engineering or whatever stream they might be taken up? What would be your advice for them to how to make them stand out, how to make themselves stand out of the crowd?
Yeah. So, in terms of being standing out, right? It is basically it shows your. Uh, I mean, number one, don't do things because they add to your resume. That just does not work. That you will just come across as very. I mean, people do this a lot. People do certification courses just to get that certificate, and they'll take part just to have that on a resume. Do not do that. Any interviewer worth his salt can tell you in a 30-second interview whether you actually did what you claim you did or whether you just did it for the certificate. So do not do that. Be genuinely curious in things that are outside of your curriculum. If you are a software engineer, right, you can get involved with open source projects. You can get involved with community projects. There are companies out there. There are people out there who are looking for people who will contribute to that. And I think that's the biggest advantage of being something like computer science is you can sit in Goa and you can build Mozilla's code. So as computer science, be involved in open source coding projects, and those things really matter. Like any employer, if they see you working on things that you did not have to work on, that is fantastic. What worked well for me, so when I was in GEC did not have a formal internship program, right? But I really wanted to go and get some real world experience. So, and what I did was, it was not even engineering, right? I just wanted to know how cars work better. So what I did was, I went to the Kakulo Ford dealership in Verna, and just for a month between, I think, my sixth and seventh semesters, if I'm not wrong, I just worked at the service station for 1 year. I changed tires, helped them change oil. When they were disassembling the engine, I was just passing the tools around. So I worked literally on the service floor for a month. Now this was, and people that were asking me, hey, you're an engineer, why are you doing these things? But that was one of the tremendous experiences for me, because this was the first time I was actually seeing what the cars look like on the inside. It's one thing to learn about four-stroke engines in your classroom, and then you realize the actual engines have reached way ahead of what you're being taught. So that was tremendously enriching experience for me. And that was okay. So this is the mechanical part of it, but the other part of it that really helped me was seeing how people at that level in a company work. Normally, as an engineer, you would never work on the service floor, but seeing how those people work give me appreciation for what are the difficulties that they come across, how they think about HR, how they think about how they are managed from the top down, how they see the general manager, how this. That was a tremendously enriching experience, right? And this was something I was able to talk about in my interview at Ford. When they were going through my resume, they were like, "Hey, what about this?" And I told them about all of this, and they thought it was very impressive that I had actually gotten my hands dirty on a service floor, even when I didn't have to. So that would be one example. The other thing I did, so I went through, and again, no shame in admitting this, right? So after I finished my masters, there was a long time when I was looking for a job, about a year of looking for a job, and there are reasons for this. Like in the initially, I was very rigid about the kind of jobs I wanted. Then and we'll probably come back to this question because it's important to not be, we'll come back to this. But I was looking for a job for a long time, and what I did during that phase was build myself a website, and that just basically listed, "Hey, I'm Sagar, and this is why you should hire me." And I went into details of what I had done before. And when my boss saw this website, again, it is not something you see every candidate do. So she thought that was very interesting that I had built this website for myself. And again, none of these things by themselves got me the job, but when it comes to setting yourself apart, each of these things matter. So things like this, basically think outside the box. Don't keep doing what everyone around you is doing. Be genuinely curious and be a part of things happening around you. So be genuinely interested in stuff is what I would say. Don't do things for your resume.
Yeah, that is helpful.
Sorry, you guys are really cutting out.
Or can you hear me?
Yeah.
What you said was pretty relevant because most people nowadays, just to get a tick a checkbox on their resume, end up getting an internship somewhere or do a certification program, wherein not much learning happens. But yeah, at the end of the day, they have a certificate in hand. So,
See,
um,
and the thing with that is it will get you a line in your resume, right? But by that itself never gets you a job. So when you go to an interview, if you are not able to articulate what you did and what your actual experience was, that line in your resume does not matter anything. You can have certification in rocket science, but if you can't tell how a rocket works, or even just how a bolt fits in a rocket, that doesn't mean anything, right? You have to be able to talk about what you did, and that comes out of genuine work. It does not come out of a certificate. Nobody
and
sees a certificate in a job interview, honestly. So
yeah, and in writing something on your CV which you cannot explain,
yeah.
which you cannot
Oh, of
talk
course.
about, will probably backfire and
Oh,
go
absolutely.
against you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So now coming back to what you had hinted at, there was a question pertaining to the same as well.
Mhm.
You did your master's in aerospace engineering, so I'm guessing you probably had an intention
Mhm.
for doing so, and you eventually landed up as a vehicle experience
Yeah.
design
Yeah.
engineer in
Yeah.
that sort of a profile and that sort of a role.
Mhm.
So how was that journey, and what did you learn when you undertook that journey of changing disciplines? Was it by choice? Was it based on market circumstances? How was it for you?
Yeah. So as I said, I dreamed of being an aerospace engineer from like a very young age, right? And because it's fascinating, right? And I think part of this goes back to like the theme word nowadays is follow your passion, right? And I was deep into that Kool-Aid. I'm like, okay, that's going to be my passion. I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. So when I wanted to take up aerospace right after my 12th standard, but did not end up getting in IITs or any of the good institutes that offered aerospace. So I opted for mechanical because it was one of the branches that then allows me to go into aerospace as my master's. So I took up mechanical. Then I got admitted to aerospace engineering at ASU, as you said. I went there, and it was pretty much obvious within the first 3 months. That's when we had a like first career fair, right? That aerospace companies almost always ask for US citizenship. And what happened then was a lot of the Indians who had got admitted to the aerospace programs, most of them changed their branch over to either mechanical engineering or industrial engineering or one of the other streams, right? But I had decided very early on that I want to be an aerospace engineer, right? So now that I'm in the program, I'm not going to give that up. So I was very rigid about it, and I stuck with that degree. And I was literally, I think, one or two people who stuck with that aerospace degree. In hindsight, stupid move, but sure, I did that. Then my specific specialization within aerospace was computational fluid dynamics, which is just it's using your computer simulations to basically design and alter fluid flows. Now, this job, even though it was I was studying it within aerospace, this domain applies to almost every field out there. You know, it's like fluid dynamics, wherever fluids flow, so automobile engineering or whatever, it can be applied to any flow. So I'm like, okay, you know, it's a broad enough field. I'll get some job. If not in an aerospace company, I'll get in some other company. So I stuck to my that's what my specialization was, computational fluid dynamics. And then I said I graduated, I was looking for a job. Initially, I was looking at only aerospace companies. Quickly realized they can't hire me. Then I started looking at companies who develop computational fluid dynamics software. Again, I realized of those there are first of all very few companies that develop those software, and even of those companies, quite a few, because they work so closely with the defense industry, or because they have enough American candidates available, they do not sponsor visas for foreign citizens. So that really narrowed down the pool to very few companies that I could realistically apply for. And that's always hard to get because if you imagine there are students like me in every university in the US, everyone is trying to apply for the same job. And again, I did not have anything on my resume that made me stand out for a CFD job. And there were people from other institutes who had developed CFD code in their undergrad, who had had some exposure or something, some projects for CFD from their undergrad, and I did not have that. So that put me at a disadvantage, right? So, but I was adamant on that for a long time because that's what I always wanted to do. But after a few months, I realized, okay, that was not going to work. So then I broadened my scope to companies that can use some of the other courses that I had taken. I had taken a course in design of experiments, experimental methods, uh, and a lot of my projects involved a lot of data analysis, dealing with large data sets. So then I started looking for companies where I could use those skills. And at the same time, so this getting this Ford job was it's a bit of a luck. But again, so Manzil was one of the guys who went to college with me while at GEC. He had also done his master's in a different university, and he landed up at Ford. And then my current boss, she just mentioned to him that, hey, I'm just looking for candidates. Do you have anyone? And he recommended me. I sent my resume, and then my boss saw the website that I had made. She saw that I had worked at Ford, so she gave me a call, and then that's how the job worked out. And again, I had to go through all those stages of being adamant about aerospace jobs to opening to CFD jobs to okay, now I'm open to other jobs. If you see, it's a process of really putting my ego back a lot. And it's only when I did that was when I took up this job. Now I've been doing this job for 2.5 years, and if you ask me, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. And I'll give you reasons why. Uh, is what I realize now and what I did not appreciate then was so computational fluid dynamics, using that software, it's a tool, right? It is a tool to analyze flows, analyze this. And what I always thought happened in the industry was, as a mechanical engineer or aerospace engineer, you design a part, you use CFD to analyze your part, you see what's happening, you modify the part, and then you deliver that part. So I thought one person owned this entire chain. And then you actually go into the industry and you realize it doesn't happen like that. The studio guys are the ones who design the part. The mechanical engineer comes in and draws up the initial design. He throws that part to a company which does the actual CAD design. They pass the design on to the next group that actually does the CFD analysis or whatever analysis, computer aided analysis. And then they pass the report back to the engineer. He sees what has to be changed. and then he makes the change and it again goes through. But basically every part of the design process is a different team which specializes only in that team. So if I had gotten into a job that did CFD, all I would do was take a part that someone gave me, run the simulation for them, and give the part back to them. So I would have played one role in this very small part. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing that job, but now if I think, would I be interested in doing that over and over and over again? I don't think so, because it is you're just you're a part of a very small process, right? Whereas the role that I get to play now, I constantly get to ask myself, okay, what do my customers want? Because at a very high level, my job is taking a customer preference for what they like and convert them into engineering metrics that can be engineered. So I'm playing this role of a translator, and it works well with the skills that I had, which is like communication skills, being able to talk the technical language as well as the non-technical language, playing that bridge. So it worked well with my skill, and I get to work with everyone from the design studio to the engineers to the suppliers to the manufacturing team and the managers and the workers. I'm getting exposure with a wide range of the company, and I'm constantly getting to ask myself the questions, okay, what is it that the consumer wants? It's a very strategic question, it's a very product level question, and I think that works well for me as an engineer, as a person, because it is hoping it's helping me to develop the skill which works well with the skill set I have. So the job has worked out well for me, but again, I would have never taken this job right out of college because I did not know it is what I'm good at. I would have looked for a CFD job, so I had to open my mind to this possibility, and it worked out well. So what I would tell people is, do not be rigid with the kind of jobs you're seeking, right? And a lot of the times, people say, okay, I need to get a core job because my degree is in mechanical engineering. Your degree does not have to define you. The degree is a tool. It is not just because you got a degree in mechanical engineering does not mean you have to be a mechanical engineer for the rest of your life. You're always open to change your field. So you can always be a software engineer. Some of the world's best software engineers are actually mechanical or electronics engineers, right? So your degree does not have to define you. So be open to opportunities. Don't be rigid in what you're looking for. Definitely have some idea of what you want to do, but if opportunities walk your way, don't always reject them just because your degree is in the wrong field. So that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, that is pretty helpful because a lot of people who we are in touch with, who we know of, are currently in the situation wherein they do have skills, but
Mhm.
they're not what the market is asking for right now. So this advice is pretty critical, I believe, because the sooner one realizes about how one can fit into the industry and have a mutually beneficial sort of an arrangement, I think the better it is. So we've got one question coming in, Sagar, like, this is pretty much on the emotional front. So during the period when you were searching for jobs, did it ever occur to you that you should head back to India, probably
Oh, it,
pick up a
it
job
did.
at
Oh, yeah, it obviously did, because I think if I have to choose one time of like that was introspective like none before, it was that time, because you are really introspecting on what it is that's really important to you. You're asking all sort of, okay, how important is this? What I the idea of career I have in mind? How do I want to stay in the US, or I want to go back to India? What do I want to do? So I've never introspected more in life. So that was definitely a time where I really looked inside myself on what it is I wanted to do. And honestly, coming back to India was an option. If I hadn't gotten the job at Ford that I had gotten at that time, I was very close at that point to deciding to come back to India. It was I was just fortunate that the Ford thing came up at that time. But yeah, definitely I was. And you have to be you realistic. You have to evaluate all your options. And again, I was lucky in the sense that, like in the financial sense of it, I had some loan, but I had also gotten the Goa scholarship, and I had got a part time job when I was there. So financially, I would have a loan if I am, but it was a manageable loan, which is not an option that many people have, because they take a very large amount of loan to come to masters. They don't get a scholarship. And by the way, scholarship is another thing people just assume they will get, but it is extremely competitive, and not everyone gets a scholarship, because again, everyone's profiles look exactly the same. So I was lucky enough in the sense that coming back was realistically an option for me. It isn't always for everybody, or you're not going to pay back that loan with a job in India. So that's just something to be aware of when you're coming, when you're deciding to come to the US. And it is definitely stressful. I know the idea that people have in India of all. I'm sure you'll see Facebook photos of friends of yours who have gone to US. Photos look very nice. It is, I would say, at least when you're studying, it is a very trying times for you. It's not easy. People are trying to balance master's degrees with part-time jobs, and it's a very intense coursework. I'm doing a master's here. Um, it keeps you on your toes. I wouldn't say it's very difficult. It's doable, but it keeps you on your toes. You're constantly working, so they are very stressful times. So it's important to be aware of that. It's not all beds of roses when you come for your masters here. So yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I think we would probably to summarize that discussion on aerospace engineering, because we had a question about what this opportunity and scope for aerospace is. Would it be right to say that it's bright, but if and only if you are a U.S. citizen, at least, I mean, doing a master's in
In
aerospace.
India, sorry, in the US for sure. In US, the field is very much right now. It's literally, I mean, all the companies that you hear of, so NASA, Boeing, SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, none of them honestly don't hire Indian citizens as they are. They hire people, Indian citizens, after they get a green card, which right now is a very long wait. Or they hire very few of them only if it is an expertise that they're extremely looking for. And by the way, normal engineering almost always does not qualify. It is, if you have a very specific skill set, then they'll go out of their way to try to get you a US citizenship, and then they'll hire you, especially for companies like NASA. But for an average engineer, it's almost impossible to get into these companies. And you don't have to take my word for it. If you go on their website, they have a careers page. They almost always mention in the careers, in the job listing, that this position requires a US citizen, or that we do not do visa sponsorship for this position. So in the US, it's tough. In India, there are a few companies that are coming up in this field. So you have, again, none of them are discounting you just for your citizenship because you're an Indian citizen, but they're very limited jobs. And a lot of them are in the public sector. So companies like ISRO, NAL, HAL, it's everything that comes with a public sector job security, sure, but a lot of bureaucracy also. But there's a lot of private players coming in. There's Tata Advanced Systems. There is Reliance is getting into defense. The Mahindra is getting into defense. So there's a lot of private sector in India is coming up. It's still very competitive because just because of the sheer number of engineers that are graduating out of Indian colleges. So just something to be aware of. Not like you can't do it. Just be aware of the competition that you're facing. That's all.
And I think we'd like to go in for a closing round of questions. And this is the much awaited question on masters in the US. So the process of how do you go about selecting a college? How does a college select you? As in, what do they look for in an ideal candidate, as well as the finances? How do all of these things work out? If you could, brief us on this, I think it would be of great value to
Okay.
the audience.
So, so I wrote an entire blog post on this, and it was literally titled "My Not So Short Guide to MS in US," because it's really not short. It's so the blog itself. If you want to go, it's sphericalcube.blogspot.com, and the spherical, it's SFERI, spherical. So sphericalcube.blogspot.com. If you go to a list of posts on there, you will see one of the posts is titled My Not So Short Guide to MS in US." So if you always want to go back, always go back to that. But to explain it in very short process, the entire application process, you have to start almost a year before you intend to go. So usually the colleges start in August. So The US universities have a fall semester and a spring semester. Fall semester is the one that begins in August every year, July, August timeframe, and spring is what begins in January. So most people start in fall, they start in August, but it's up to you. You can decide to start in January. So the process of application begins approximately a year before you want to go. So if I want to go in August 2020, I would start the process by end of this year. The first stage is usually answering the exams that you need to answer. So for US, it is GRE and TOEFL. For other countries, the exams differ. If you're going to UK, you have to usually answer IELTS instead of TOEFL. GRE, pretty much every international university requires you to answer GRE for MS. And if you're going for MBA, it's GMAT. But you're required to answer these. So you answer this exam about a year before. And there's varied people, especially coming from India, we have a different understanding of a competitive exam. So in GATE, for example, you have to have a very high percentile. You need to be 99 point whatever percentile, and you basically get admissions in the based on your rank in the exam. The best universities take the top few rankers. GRE is slightly different in the sense that uh, it is possible for you to have a comparatively lower GRE score. So I can have a GRE score that's lower than Raj, but if the rest of my profile makes up for it, I can still get admission. And even though Raj has a higher GRE score than me, he may or may not get admission. So your absolute position in that rank does not matter, but the score matters in the sense that the highest universities look for a certain range of GRE scores. So there is a minimum cutoff below which they will not admit certain people. And there are many websites online which tell you based on your score how likely you are to get into a certain university. So that is GRE. TOEFL is almost always a minimum requirement in that as long as you have a certain minimum TOEFL score, your TOEFL score does not matter as much. So I think when I answered it, it was, I believe it was out of 120. And as long as you had something like 84, 85, your score was good enough, which, by the way, is not at all a problem for most Goans because we are used to English from a very young age in our schools and stuff. So that's the exams part of it. Then the second piece of it is actually applying to the university, and this is where it gets tricky in the sense that every university that you apply to costs you money. It's almost about on an average it's about $100 per university, which is not a trivial amount. So you can't apply for every university. You have to decide how many you'll apply to. I had applied to just 4 universities. In hindsight, that was a mistake. I think 8 is a good number. And what people do is choose 2 universities that are fairly safe to get into, 4 that are moderate, where you can't say whether you will get into or not, and 2 that are ambitious for the scores and the profile that you have, just in case there's a chance that you get. So usually 8 is like a ballpark recommended number. Again, there are a lot of websites that tell you based on your GRE and TOEFL scores how likely you are to get into a certain university. So the stage comes to you pick those universities that you want to go to. You go on the website. Almost all universities nowadays have an online application process. You have to write something called as a statement of purpose. And I think here it helps if you actually research the university that you want to go to. So all the universities I had applied to, I was looking for a very specific specialization that they offered, called multidisciplinary design optimization. I was looking for a very specific course. So it helps if you're that specific in our application process. It helps. Again, it's not required. Many people don't do this, and it's perfectly fine. It just helps your case if you do that research and you genuinely apply to. If you're applying to, say, Stanford, and you tell them, oh, I'm applying to you because I did this research, I found out this specialization and this professor, I read their paper, and I think I want to work under them. So if you're specific like that, it always helps your case. So, but every university, you are expected to write an essay detailing why you want to join that university. You have to fill out the generic application process. You have to attach some letters of recommendation from some of your professors, and then you send your application. Usually, the deadline is for, again, fall semester that starts in August. The deadlines are usually December to January before that August. Uh, and then you basically wait for the results to come. Usually, you hear from the universities by March to April timeframe. Then you choose which university you want to go with, and then you just do the formalities with that university. Now, in terms of what works and what does not, now this is always a black box because universities are not always transparent about exactly what they're willing to accept and what they are not. So I can't. There's no definite answers there, and I have seen examples where some of my very qualified friends from IITs that too failed to get admission to university, and someone with much lesser scores and much lower ranked colleges got admission. So it's a bit of a black box. But again, having good scores throughout always helps in your 10th, 12th engineering. It helps. It's as I say, it's not a sufficient condition, but it always helps. Um, so having good scores help. Having a good all-rounded profile helps. If you have done stuff outside of your college coursework, if you come across as a well-rounded individual, that always helps. And then your statement of purpose helps in the sense how you can articulate why that college is right for you. And by the way, for some reason, every single a lot of people send me their statement of purpose to just read through, and for some reason all of us start our SOPs the same way. When I was a kid, I loved to break open my alarm clock or remote control car or whatever that was. I learned to see how they worked inside, and that developed my interest in mechanical engineering or electronics engineering or computers, whatever it is. And then that's how I got into this field. Somehow, this is the standard story for every single person I read. And I'm like, don't do this. Why are we doing this? And it's probably I possibly did this too. I don't know. It's just the way we do stuff. But being genuine in that essay always helps. So again, these are things that help. Does not guarantee you admission, but there are always some universities that's willing to take you. It's just how well ranked that university is that changes. Uh, the other important part to consider here is how much the financial piece of it. So definitely, I was lucky in the sense that it's not like my parents were rich enough to like fund the entire education. I definitely took a education loan from SBI, but you do need certain amount of money even for the application process. So answering GRE, TOEFL, each of those exam cost about 10,000 rupees each. Then you're applying to each university and you're looking at spending about 7 to 8,000 per university to apply. Sometimes you need to send them documents which cost you 1 or 2,000. The actual visa application process to US requires about 20 to 25,000, and then your flight tickets. So you are spending a lot of money even before you have got to US, and you need to make sure you have that sort of financial buffer to be able to uh, apply for it. And then a lot of people, so definitely you can rely on education loans to pay your fees. So the fees look very intimidating when you see them on paper, but know that there are education loans out there that can fund that piece of it. But you need to be still aware of what you are getting into, because a lot of people assume they will get a scholarship and they'll get a campus job when they get to US, and that does not always work. It's not easy to get scholarships. It is not easy to get campus jobs. It took me, I think, good 8 to 9 months to land a campus job. Then I got a campus job as a tutor on campus, but it took a good 8 to 9 months. So if things don't go the way you plan to, you need to make sure you have enough financial buffer to be able to take care of this thing. So that's something to be aware of. Uh, and once you get a job, it's fairly easy to pay back the loans. I know most people end up paying back the loan in 2 to 3 years after they graduate, worst case. But again, that relies on the fact that you get a job and does not always work out that way. So just make sure you guys are covered for the worst case in case the finances don't work out. But it's something to be aware of. It's doable with a fairly middle class family. It's doable, but it's just something you need to be aware of what you're getting into. So that is my short version of it, as short as I can make it.
So we will definitely link the blog
Yeah.
post in the description of the video.
Yeah.
And I think it's time that we take closing comments from you, Sagar, especially, like advice for people who are currently in the final year of college, who are probably, students who are not in disciplines which have jobs raining on them.
Right.
What would your,
So
few lines
yeah,
of advice?
so definitely don't rely on just your coursework to reflect in your resumes, your college projects and stuff, because you can be sure everybody in your class will have the exact same projects on their resume. So be curious about what's happening in your field in general, where the trend is going. So like computer science, it's right now it's a lot about machine learning, and data science is big right now on computer science side of things. On electronic side, it's a lot of embedded systems, lot of VLSI stuff that's happening. Again, I increasingly there is a very little differentiation between electronics and computer science. All these fields are working together right now, so it's not like you can ignore trends in any of the fields. For mechanical, for example, I distinctly remember this. uh, when I was in mechanical engineering in my undergrad, like people were complaining about, hey, why do I have to learn about electrical engineering, or why do I have to learn about computer programming? That's not core mechanical. Well, if you ask what is the overarching trend in the automobile engineering was considered the corest of mechanical branches you can get. Which are the engineers that Ford is looking for? It's software engineers. And the overarching trend in automobile engineering is right now is electrification of cars, which is all electrical motors. It is infotainment system, which is all computers and electronics, and it is autonomous vehicles, which is again it's all computer science, machine learning, computer vision, all of them. So automobile engineering, which was such a bread and butter field for mechanical engineers, is now all about software and electronics. So be aware of where your industry is going and position yourself to make use of these trends. Make sure you are not developing skill in a field that's not the hottest in your field. If it's not hottest, you will still get a job, but it's not where you want to be from your career point of view. You want to position yourself to take advantage of where the field is moving. When I was graduating from GEC, it was all about, for computer science, it was all about Android and iOS apps at that point, because that's where the tailwinds were. So position yourself to take advantage of where your industry is moving as a whole. So keep a ear on the ground to where your industry is going, and be curious. And when I say be curious, it's not, again, I gave the example of computer science and mechanical and electronics cross pollinating, but it's not just the engineering disciplines, right? It is, uh, if you're doing UI UX as a computer science engineer, sure, you need to be good with the coding part of it, but you also need to understand human behavior and psychology and consumer behavior. These are things that engineers most often don't even think about. Or when it comes to my job, I constantly have to ask, what do users want and what do users like? It's a very intangible field. You're going into human psychology, human behavior. These are things it always helps to be curious about. And especially, I think, computer science engineers, you are almost always developing a tool for a different industry. Maybe it is food delivery or e-commerce or whatever. It always helps to understand how the work that you do fits in with the larger puzzle that is your company. And it always helps to be curious in what it is that your company does and what you're doing, how it fits into the larger scheme of things. So be curious about things that are not adding things to a resume, but they're adding to you as a person. So read, be curious, and just don't limit yourself by your degree. Don't let your degree define what it is that you do. Just be curious about the world around you. Um, Being a well-rounded person always helps, no matter what job you go to, because for people to be able to work with you, they have to like you. And if they have to like you, you need to be able to hold a conversation with them. And to hold the conversation, just being a well-rounded person in general helps. So be more social. Don't confine yourself to your computers. Go out there, talk to people, talk to events, be a part of things that are happening around you, and just develop your personal skills. Do not settle into a cocoon. Those would be the advice that I give you.
So I think we've had like a good long hour of chatting
Yes.
up here, and
Yeah.
thank you so much, Sagar, for tuning in
No
on
problem.
a Saturday morning for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and the guys who are just listening, again, if you guys ever need any help from me, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, fairly easy to find, overactive on social media. So just search for me and you'll find me, and always happy to help in whatever way I can. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and just a small little, plug-in for Nova Semita, things that we do here at Nova Semita. If there are a few things that we can pick up from the video, it is the fact that it is important now more than ever to stand out when it comes to navigating one's path, be it in academia or in the industry, right? And what we at Noah Samita do is exactly that. We take on individuals who want to get themselves a career in tech, and we invest in them. We invest in them with the best of our resources, or a network of mentors, a network of people in the industry, like Sagar, hands-on projects which will actually be shipped out to real-world users for once, and yeah, a network of like-minded individuals who are trying to make things happen. That's what we do at Noah Simita. And if anyone who's watching this would like to sign up for our fellowship program, do feel free. We will leave a link in the description that you can check out. And we hope to bring to you more of these webinars with people who are out there, who have experienced things that we are curious about, right? So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks Sagar for taking time out
Thank
once
you.
again.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and thanks to all the people who are watching in. Right. So yeah, have a good weekend, all of you all.
Bye bye.
Bye.